People don't just come up with ideas. Sometimes it feels like ideas take hold of us. That's what Carl Jung meant. Have you ever had the sense that your way of thinking doesn't line up with what people expect? Maybe you've been nudged to be more logical when you've always relied on your emotions. Or maybe you've been called too sensitive just because you notice things that others ignore. Right now, your brain is working in a unique way, one that shapes how you think, how you make choices, and how you connect with the world around you. Jung believed there are 4 core personality types. Thinkers are driven by logic, always analyzing, always seeking structure. Feelers are guided by their emotions, by what matters to them, by how they relate to people. Sensors are grounded in the real world, trusting what they can see, touch, and measure. And then there are the intuitives, those who look beyond the obvious, who are drawn to possibilities and patterns. You might think you already know where you fall, but what if you've been misled your whole life? Since you were a kid, you've been pushed to behave a certain way. Parents, teachers, even friends. Without knowing it, they trained you to fit into a box. If you were a logical kid, maybe you were told to lighten up. If you were emotional, maybe people said you were too much. If your imagination ran wild, maybe they called you a daydreamer. If you focused on facts and order, maybe they saw you as uptight. From day one, you were being shaped to meet someone else's idea of who you should be. But what if that idea was never actually yours? Jung believed that most people never stop to ask whether the way they see the world is really their own. And here's why that matters. Knowing how your mind works gives you power. It lets you stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. But there's a twist. The part of you that takes the lead, the dominant personality function, isn't the whole picture. Underneath that surface is something deeper, hidden in your unconscious. And that's often where the feeling comes from, the sense that something's always been off. Because recognizing how you think is just the beginning. Real change happens when you uncover what you've been ignoring. So, what type are you? Because whether you've noticed or not, it's already been shaping your thoughts, your decisions, and even your relationships. But before we explore the 4 personality types in more detail, there's an even more basic layer to how you operate in the world. Jung said that we all lean one of 2 ways when it comes to where we get our energy. Introverts turn inward. They need space to reflect and recharge. Extroverts, on the other hand, focus outward. They thrive on action, people, and conversation. A lot of folks mix this up. They think introverts are shy or antisocial, and that extroverts are always loud and outgoing. But that's not the full story. You can be an introvert and still be bold and outspoken. You just refuel by being alone. And you can be an extrovert who enjoys quiet moments, but you feel most alive around others. Neither approach is better. They're just different paths through life. And these 2 attitudes, introversion and extroversion, aren't the whole personality. They're just the entry point. What really defines how you see reality are the 4 key functions Jung described. Thinking is the logical, analytical side of us. Thinkers care about facts, systems, and solving problems. Feeling is about connection and inner values. Feelers want harmony and emotional honesty. Sensation is all about the here and now. Sensors trust their senses and live in the moment. Intuition looks to the future, seeing meaning in symbols, dreams, and patterns others miss. We all lead with one of these. It colors everything: our choices, our relationships, how we react under stress. But here's the big question. Do you really know which one is yours? Or have you been hiding it without realizing to fit in? If you've been pushing aside your natural way of thinking, life can feel like a constant uphill climb. Making decisions might seem harder than they should be. Socializing might wear you out. You might even feel like you're always playing a role instead of just being yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's because you've been living out of sync with who you truly are. Sometimes your interactions with others might feel awkward or even forced. But when you finally figure out your dominant personality function, a lot of things start to click. You begin to realize why you think the way you do, why certain situations leave you completely drained, and why other moments light you up inside. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." According to him, most people never fully grasp which function is leading their lives. Society often pushes us to become someone we're not. But once you recognize the way your mind naturally works, it becomes easier to make decisions, grow in your relationships, and understand yourself better. Drop a comment. Do you think you're more of a thinker, feeler, sensor, or intuitive? What do you think has most influenced the way you see the world? And if you want to dive deeper into Jung's ideas and how they connect to everyday life, hit that subscribe button. Jung's personality theory doesn't stop at the basic 4 types. Each function, thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting, can show up in one of 2 ways. Either turned outward toward the world, extraversion, or inward toward your own thoughts and reflections, introversion. This gives us 8 personality types, each with its own way of understanding reality. Getting to know these types isn't just about putting a label on yourself. It's about noticing the unconscious habits and patterns that shape who you are. Take extraverted thinking types, for example. These folks crave order, results, and clarity. Their minds are like those of engineers, focused on making systems that run smoothly and effectively. They make choices based on facts and what's proven to work, not emotions. But that strength in logic can turn into a weakness. They might overlook how others feel or brush off emotional nuance because it seems less useful. They build strong systems, but sometimes miss the human impact of their decisions. Introverted thinkers, on the other hand, are all about internal analysis. They're less focused on controlling the outside world and more invested in figuring out how everything works from within. They question everything, breaking ideas down until they reach what feels like the truest understanding. These people often work behind the scenes, thinking deeply before speaking, and their insights can be brilliant. But they can also get stuck in their own heads, struggling to translate their ideas into action. Then there are those who lead with extraverted feeling. These individuals are all about harmony and emotional connection. They're like emotional barometers, able to sense what others need almost before it's spoken. They adapt naturally to the social atmosphere, knowing exactly how to make others feel understood and valued. But because they care so much about the group, they might forget about their own needs, trying so hard to keep the peace that they lose sight of themselves. In spaces where emotional sensitivity is a strength, they shine. But in cold, logic-heavy settings, they may feel completely out of place. Now, contrast that with introverted feelers. These people don't seek outside approval. They follow a strong inner value system. They make decisions based on what feels deeply true to them, not on what the group thinks is right. While extroverted feelers adjust themselves to others, introverted feelers stick to their convictions. They're often the creators of deep, personal art or ideas that challenge norms. But their inner depth can sometimes make them feel alone, especially if their values clash with the world around them. Moving beyond thinking and feeling, you have the extroverted sensors. These are the hands-on types, completely tuned into the here and now. They experience life with intensity and clarity, soaking in every sight, sound, and texture. They're the people who act fast, stay grounded, and jump into action. But with that strong present moment focus, they may find it hard to plan for the future. They tend to chase excitement, and sometimes forget to stop and ask, where am I going with all this? Finally, introverted sensors experience the world by comparing it to what they already know. They move through life using memory and personal history as their compass. They're all about tradition, comfort, and what's proven to work. Their minds are like a huge storage room, filled with vivid memories and quiet observations that others miss. They take comfort in what's familiar, and they build their lives on things that feel safe and stable. Even though these individuals are incredibly dependable, they can sometimes get stuck in the past, finding it hard to adapt when everything around them is evolving. Then there are people fueled by extraverted intuition, big dreamers who live not in the present, but in what could be. While most people focus on what's in front of them, these folks are constantly chasing future possibilities. Their minds are overflowing with ideas, and they light up when they're exploring, inventing, and making unexpected connections. They're always leaping from one concept to the next, driven by endless curiosity. But all that creative energy can feel scattered. They often leave things unfinished, getting pulled in too many directions. Their main challenge is learning how to bring their ideas down to earth and actually follow through. On the flip side, introverted intuition is more like a slow burn, quiet, deep, and incredibly focused. People who lead with this function often experience moments of sudden clarity that seem to come out of nowhere. But really, their minds have been quietly making connections in the background all along. They have a strong sense of where things are headed, almost like they can see the future taking shape. Their insights can feel almost magical or visionary. But because their thought process is so internal, it's often hard for them to explain how they got there. Others might be amazed or confused by how they think. These 8 personality types reflect different ways we interact with the world. But no one is just one thing. Jung believed that each of us has a dominant function, the one we lean on the most. But we also use other functions, even if we're not fully aware of them. And this is where it gets fascinating. The function we're weakest in, the one we push aside or ignore, might actually be the one that holds the most power to help us grow. A lot of our internal struggles come not from the parts of ourselves we use all the time, but from the parts we've left in the shadows. So, the real question isn't just, what's your type? Your personality isn't just a single trait. It's a layered system of mental habits working together. Some parts take the lead, steering your decisions and actions. Others stay in the background, gently shaping your thoughts and reactions. And then there's the part you barely notice, the part so buried in your unconscious that it can quietly influence your life without you even realizing it. If ignored, this hidden function can turn into your greatest weakness. But if acknowledged and developed, it becomes a major source of personal strength. According to Jung, everyone has one dominant function, the one that feels most natural. It's the part of you that just fits, like it's always been there. A thinker will approach the world through logic and rules. A feeler will lean into emotions and moral values. A sensor trusts what's real and right in front of them. An intuitive is drawn to meanings and future potential. This dominant function usually shows up early in life and becomes the main way we filter our experiences. But no one works with just one function. Think of your dominant function as the star of the show, but it needs support. That's where the auxiliary function comes in. It's like the best supporting actor, providing backup and balance. If someone leads with thinking, their auxiliary might be feeling, helping them tune into the emotional side of things. An intuitive might rely on sensation to stay connected to what's real. The auxiliary doesn't run the show, but it plays a vital role in keeping you balanced and more rounded. Then, there's the tertiary function. It hangs around in the background, not as developed, but it shows up now and then. Some people become more aware of it as they grow older, while others may never realize it's there. A bold, extroverted thinker might have a quieter, intuitive side that pops up with creative ideas. But because it's not their usual way of operating, it doesn't get used often or to its full potential. And finally, there's the inferior function, the one that lives deep in the unconscious. It's the hardest to reach, the least understood, but it carries incredible potential for growth. Think of it as your shadow. It's unpredictable, it resists being controlled, and it tends to show up during times of stress or emotional overload. An extroverted sensor, for example, might struggle with abstract thinking if introverted intuition is their weakest function. A strong thinker might feel overwhelmed when emotions take over, because feeling is their most underdeveloped trait. This is where it all comes together. That weakest part of you, the one that feels frustrating or confusing, is also the gateway to becoming whole. Jung believed that real transformation, what he called individuation, happens when we embrace the pieces of ourselves we've ignored. But our minds naturally resist that process. We like to stick with what feels familiar. Still, if you want to grow, you have to reach into that unfamiliar space and start building a relationship with the part of yourself you've left in the dark. That's where real balance begins. Stepping outside your natural way of thinking isn't easy. If you're someone who relies heavily on logic, diving into your emotional side might feel awkward or even unsettling. And if you're someone who leads with emotion, tackling hard facts and cold logic can feel just as uncomfortable. But here's the truth. If you keep avoiding the parts of yourself that aren't fully developed, you might end up stuck in a narrow, oversimplified version of who you are. Think about your own experiences. Have you ever been in a situation where your usual mindset just didn't work? Maybe you're someone who thrives on big ideas and imagination, but when it comes to small, practical details, you completely freeze up. Or maybe you're a highly structured thinker who excels in logic, but when emotional intelligence is needed, you suddenly feel like a fish out of water. These frustrating moments aren't random. They're signals that your less developed functions are asking to be seen. So, what does all this mean when it comes to growing as a person? It means that intentionally working on the parts of your mind that you're less comfortable with is one of the most powerful things you can do. If you lead with emotion, practicing logical thinking can help bring more balance. If logic is your strong suit, allowing space for vulnerability and emotional connection can deepen your relationships. If you're someone who trusts what you can see and touch, learning to explore abstract thoughts and future possibilities can widen your perspective. And if you're always lost in ideas, getting grounded in the here and now can help you turn dreams into action. Jung never said we should change who we are. He believed in growing into more of who we are. Your dominant function is your superpower, but real psychological maturity comes when you make peace with the sides of yourself you've pushed away. The more balanced you become, the more authentic and whole you'll feel. A lot of what shapes who we are actually lives below the surface, outside our everyday awareness. We like to think we're fully in control, that our choices, our behavior, our reactions are all intentional. But Jung believed that this sense of control is often an illusion. Beneath every fear, every gut reaction, every decision we make, there's a deeper force at play, the unconscious mind. And deep within that unconscious lies something Jung called the shadow. The parts of ourselves we've learned to hide, deny, or even reject. The shadow holds everything we were told not to be. Our anger, our envy, our neediness, our shame. It's not that these traits don't exist in us. They do. But we were taught early on that they were unacceptable. A child taught to always be nice might suppress their anger. Someone mocked for being sensitive may start to believe vulnerability equals weakness. Over time, those disowned parts don't vanish. They just get buried. But they still influence us, often in messy, unexpected ways. The shadow doesn't stay hidden forever. It shows up in sudden outbursts, in toxic patterns we can't seem to shake, or in that strange dislike we feel towards someone who reminds us of something we've buried within ourselves. The more we pretend those parts don't exist, the more power they gain. But Jung didn't see the shadow as a monster to be feared. He saw it as the doorway to real self-awareness. The goal isn't to erase the shadow. It's to get to know it, bring it into the light, and integrate it into who we are. Because once we stop running from the parts of ourselves we don't like, we gain something far more powerful: wholeness. When we recognize the unconscious patterns driving our behavior, we finally get the chance to break free. And in that space, real self-understanding begins. Jung's personality theory isn't just some abstract idea. It's a practical tool you can use in everyday life. When you understand how different types of people experience the world, it can completely change the way you handle relationships, make decisions, and build a more fulfilling life. So many arguments, misunderstandings, and frustrations don't happen because someone's trying to be difficult. They happen because people think and process things in very different ways. Learning to spot those differences can unlock better communication, smarter choices, and stronger connections. Take relationships, for instance. A thinker and a feeler might butt heads often. One sees the world through logic, the other through emotion. The thinker might dismiss the feeler's concerns as overreactions, while the feeler might see the thinker as distant or uncaring. But once they understand their different styles, something shifts. The thinker realizes that feelings aren't irrational, they just speak a different language. The feeler starts to see that logic isn't cold, it's just another form of guidance. The same is true in careers. Knowing your dominant function can mean the difference between feeling stuck in a job that drains you and thriving in one that energizes you. For example, an extroverted sensor might really struggle in a slow, highly abstract job full of constant deep analysis, but put them in a fast-moving, real-world setting where they can make quick calls and take action, and they shine. At the same time, someone with introverted intuition might find constant socializing draining, but they do really well in a job that allows them to think deeply and plan strategically. The way people solve problems also changes depending on their personality type. Extroverted thinkers usually break things down step by step and use external information to make decisions. Introverted thinkers, on the other hand, analyze quietly and deeply, considering every angle before taking action. Intuitives are always on the lookout for patterns and abstract ideas, sometimes coming up with solutions that are way ahead of their time. Sensors focus more on what's practical and right in front of them, looking for clear, immediate results. Understanding these tendencies doesn't just make individuals more effective, it helps teams work better too. Instead of getting annoyed by different approaches, people can actually learn to appreciate the strengths others bring to the table. Self-awareness is a game changer. Once you start to really understand how your mind works, how you process, how you learn, how you communicate, you stop trying to squeeze yourself into roles that don't suit you. You stop judging others for being different. And maybe, most importantly, you begin to move through life in a way that feels right, because you're finally working with your mind instead of against it. Jung's ideas have shaped everything from modern psychology to popular personality tests. But somewhere along the way, his theories got watered down or misunderstood. One of the biggest myths is that personality types are strict boxes that define who you are and what you can or can't do. But that's not what Jung believed. To him, these types were flexible mental tendencies, not rigid labels. Another common mistake is thinking people are only one thing. Either a thinker or a feeler, either intuitive or sensing. But Jung believed everyone has all four functions. We just use them in different orders and with different levels of comfort. Your dominant function might take the lead, but your other functions, your secondary, tertiary, and even the weakest one, all play a role too. Ignoring them gives you a distorted view of yourself and can make you think you'll never improve in the areas that feel harder for you. There's also a lot of confusion thanks to the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It's based on Jung's work, but changes it quite a bit. MBTI gives people four-letter codes like ENFP or ISTJ, which can make it seem like personality is fixed and final. But that wasn't Jung's view at all. He saw personality as something that grows and shifts over time through a process he called individuation. That means we gradually bring out and develop different parts of ourselves, not just stick with the same traits forever. And when it comes to introversion and extraversion, most people think they know what that means. Introverts are quiet and shy, extroverts are loud and social. But for Jung, it wasn't about behavior, it was about where your mental energy goes. Introverts turn inward, reflecting and processing things internally. Extroverts turn outward, focusing more on the outside world. So you could be an introverted thinker and still love going to parties. Or you could be an extroverted feeler who needs quiet time to reflect. Once you understand Jung's theory in its original form, not just the simplified versions, it becomes a much more powerful tool. It's not just about finding your type. It's about seeing the bigger picture of how your mind actually works. So who are you, really? Not the version of yourself shaped by outside expectations, not the identity you present to others, but the real you, underneath all of that. Jung believed that most people never become their true selves because they cling too tightly to just one part of their personality. They ignore anything that doesn't match the image they've built. Individuation is the process of undoing that. It's about bringing all of your pieces together, every side of you, into a complete, unified whole. Unlike other psychological approaches that focus on fixing flaws, individuation isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming real. It means facing the things you've buried. Your anger, your vulnerability, your creative side, even your ambition, if you've been told it's too much. Nietzsche had a similar thought when he said we should become who we are. Real growth doesn't come from chasing some ideal version of yourself. It comes from embracing your contradictions, strength and softness, logic and emotion, discipline and spontaneity. These aren't opposites, they're different parts of the same person. The journey isn't easy. Your mind will resist change, and society tends to reward people who stick to the rules, who who fit the mold. But individuation isn't about fitting in. It's about finding inner peace. Someone who's gone through this process won't be stuck in one way of thinking or feeling. They'll know when to be logical and when to listen to their heart, when to follow structure and when to trust their gut. They'll move freely between all the parts of themselves. Most people live only part of who they are, split off from pieces they never learned to accept. But the more of yourself you bring into the light, the more whole you become. But those who go through the process of individuation reach something rare, a deep sense of clarity where their thoughts, feelings, and actions start to align. Not because they've become flawless, but because they're finally living in a way that feels genuine. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And yet, most people never get there. They live by what others expect, push down their true instincts, and ignore the deeper parts of themselves that are constantly influencing their choices. But this path isn't reserved for scholars or psychologists. It's open to anyone willing to look within. If watching this made you reflect on how you think, how you feel, or how you make sense of the world around you, then you've already taken your first step on that path. But self-awareness isn't a one-time thing. It's a lifelong process. And if you're ready to go further, keep digging. Pick up Jung's psychological types, dive into Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, or explore Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. These thinkers all tackled self-discovery in their own way. And if this conversation resonated with you, consider subscribing. There's still so much more to explore. We began with one simple question: who are you? But as you've probably realized by now, the answer isn't simple at all. Your personality isn't just one trait or one fixed way of being. It's a dynamic blend of strengths, blind spots, and unexplored depths. Jung's work reminds us that growth doesn't mean choosing logic over emotion or structure over intuition. It means finding space for all of it: the known and the mysterious, the conscious and the hidden. Individuation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finally embracing the person you've always been underneath it all. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Which part of yourself will you choose to explore next?